Hello and welcome. Today we're diving into a battlefield unlike any other, where dense Pacific jungles and brutal close quarters combat reshape the very nature of warfare. Imagine fighting just a few yards apart, with the enemy lurking behind every tree, every shadow, where traditional tactics failed and new weapons took center stage. But what if I told you that the U.S. Marines introduced a weapon that shattered Japanese expectations, something they had never prepared for? Could a shotgun, a tool for hunting birds, become a game changer on the front lines? How did a weapon like the 12-gauge pump-action shotgun turn the tide in jungle battles? Why did the Japanese military, with decades of strategic planning, overlook such a weapon entirely? And what devastating advantage did American forces gain by wielding shotguns, firing multiple pellets in seconds, shattering the myth of Japanese close combat superiority? All these pieces form a perplexing puzzle. How did a simple shotgun redefine the brutal reality of Pacific warfare? In this video, we will uncover how these weapons, with their unique design and firepower, transform the battlefield, separating fact from fiction and revealing a shocking new dimension of combat. The most intense moments are just ahead, so stay with us as we explore how a single weapon changed everything. The theater of combat in the Pacific between the years of 1942 and 1945 was characterized by an environment unlike any other in modern warfare. The dense, tangled jungles and thick undergrowth that cloaked the Pacific Islands created a deadly claustrophobic battlefield where engagements often unfolded at astonishingly close quarters, sometimes within less than 30 yards. In such perilous conditions, where the distance between friend and foe was measured in mere strides, the United States Marine Corps introduced a weapon that would challenge and fundamentally alter the expectations Japanese forces held about how modern combat was conducted: the formidable 12-gauge pump-action shotgun. Though detailed and comprehensive records of its specific use in combat are somewhat scarce, the presence of Winchester Model 1897 and Model 1912 shotguns within Marine units throughout the broad Pacific campaign signifies a significant tactical advantage. These shotguns provided a firepower capability that Japanese military doctrine, heavily influenced by conventional tactics and outdated doctrines, had not anticipated or prepared for. The deployment of such weapons in close quarters combat proved to be a decisive factor in numerous engagements, shaking the very foundations of Japanese strategic assumptions. During this period, the Imperial Japanese Army had dedicated decades to preparing for war against Western nations. Their military training manuals, diligently studied and meticulously crafted, primarily addressed conflicts involving British rifles, American machine guns, French mortars, and Soviet submachine guns. Shotguns, on the other hand, regarded as tools primarily for hunting birds and game, scarcely found a place in their tactical considerations or doctrinal planning. They viewed such weapons as irrelevant in large-scale military confrontation, a significant oversight that would later manifest in critical ways. This glaring gap in Japanese preparedness would become increasingly evident as the war progressed. American forces, on the other hand, brought a substantial arsenal of shotguns into the fray, approximately 25,000 Model 1977 shotguns and between 60,000 to 80,000 Model 1912 shotguns. Their deployment during World War II added a new dimension to close quarters combat, which Japanese doctrine heavily emphasized, especially during night infiltration raids and subsequent hand-to-hand battles, where they believed their superiority in spirit and training would inevitably triumph over material disadvantages. In 1942, Japanese military strategy was founded on a philosophical principle: the assertion that spiritual strength could compensate for or even overcome physical and technological disadvantages. This doctrine wasn't merely an act of propaganda, but a carefully calculated response to the stark realities of industrial capacity. Japan, constrained by limited steel production, producing less steel in a single year than the United States did in just 1 month, focused on making each soldier as formidable as possible in close combat scenarios. Their training emphasized infiltration, stealth, and brutal close quarters combat, where the strength of the individual warrior and their close quarters fighting skills would dominate. The Japanese military's tactical approach was structured around nighttime infiltration attacks, where soldiers would stealthily penetrate enemy lines under the cover of darkness. Once behind enemy lines, the goal was to swiftly overpower defenders in close-range combat, relying heavily on the perceived superiority of their hand-to-hand fighting skills, fighting with rifles and bayonets, engaging in brutal scrambles and knife work. This tactic had proven successful against Chinese forces during earlier campaigns, as well as against British troops in Malaya and American defenders in the Philippines. The standard combat sequence was straightforward: approach under the cover of night, infiltrate the enemy's defenses, and then, at point-blank range, overwhelm the defenders. Japanese soldiers believed that their skills in close combat would give them the decisive edge. However, the introduction of American shotguns upended this entire strategic paradigm. At these very close ranges, where Japanese doctrine anticipated and relied upon dominance, American Marines wielding Winchester Model 1977 shotguns could unleash a devastating volume of fire, firing 6 loads of 000 buckshot in roughly 2 seconds by utilizing the weapon's slamfire capability. Each shell was loaded with numerous 9.33 caliber pellets, which spread widely upon firing, rendering misses nearly impossible even amidst the dense jungle vegetation. This overwhelming firepower transformed the close-quarters battlefield, turning it into an American advantage and rendering Japanese hand-to-hand combat tactics less effective. The Winchester Model 1897, originally designed by the renowned firearms engineer John Browning and refined over a span of more than 4.5 decades of production, became the primary shotgun used by Marines during these early Pacific campaigns. The military variant of this shotgun was equipped with a 20-inch barrel, a perforated heat shield, and a bayonet lug compatible with the M1917 sword bayonet. Perhaps most notably, the Model 1977 lacked a trigger disconnector, a feature that allowed continuous firing by simply maintaining pressure on the trigger while operating the pump action, a capability that made it especially lethal in rapid, close-quarters encounters. The Model 1912, another essential firearm in the Marine arsenal, was developed by Winchester engineer T.C. John, whose innovations further enhanced the shotgun's versatility and reliability in combat. The son of a renowned firearms innovator, this particular shotgun represented a significant advancement over previous designs, incorporating an internal hammer mechanism that dramatically enhanced safety by preventing accidental discharges. Unlike earlier models, which often depended on external hammers that could be inadvertently triggered, this improved weapon was engineered with internal components that minimized such risks, offering soldiers a more reliable and secure firearm in the chaos of combat. By the year 1943, this model, known as the Model 12, had largely supplanted the older Model 97 within Marine units. Despite this shift, both shotguns continued to see active use throughout the entirety of the war. Military procurement records from the period reveal a consistent pattern of production, indicating a steady demand and supply for these weapons. However, specific figures detailing the number of units deployed on the front lines or their precise roles in combat engagements remain undocumented in official documents, making it difficult to establish exact usage metrics. Equally vital to the effectiveness of these shotguns was the ammunition they fired. The standard load for the 12-gauge buckshot, commonly labeled as 300 buckshot, consisted of 9 pellets, each weighing approximately 53.8 grains and measuring about 8.38 millimeters in diameter. This specific load was chosen for its lethal potential at close ranges, especially in jungle combat scenarios where quick, decisive fire could mean the difference between life and death. In terms of shot pattern, at a distance of 10 yards, the spread of these pellets would cover roughly 10 inches across. When fired from 20 yards, the pattern expanded to about 20 inches, and at 30 yards, it grew to roughly 30 inches. This intentional pattern spread was a strategic adaptation to the challenging combat environments, particularly in dense jungle terrains where precise aiming was often impractical. During jungle warfare, where visibility rarely exceeded 30 yards, this wide spread of pellets proved invaluable. It effectively compensated for the inherent difficulty of aiming accurately amidst thick foliage, tangled undergrowth, and limited sightlines. The Guadalcanal campaign, which lasted from August 1942 to February 1943, marked the first major American offensive in the Pacific theater. It was a grueling campaign that involved intense landings and prolonged jungle fighting, testing the endurance and adaptability of U.S. forces. In these operations, Marines from the 1st Division arrived equipped with a variety of weapons, including some shotguns. Unfortunately, specific figures regarding the number of shotguns issued or their precise deployment during key battles remain unrecorded in official reports. One notable engagement during this campaign was the battle at the Tenarue River, which actually took place at Alligator Creek on August 21, 1942. During this clash, Colonel Kona Ichiki's Japanese detachment, consisting of 917 men, was virtually annihilated, with approximately 789 Japanese soldiers killed in action. While this battle is often highlighted in accounts of the Pacific War, primary sources tend to emphasize the effectiveness of machine guns, such as the Browning M1917 water-cooled models and the 73mm anti-tank guns firing canister rounds. These weapons are credited with inflicting the majority of Japanese casualties, with only passing references made to the use of shotguns during the engagement. Throughout the Guadalcanal campaign, Marines primarily employed shotguns for perimeter defense and jungle patrol duties. Photographic evidence from the period clearly shows point men, tasked with leading patrols and responding to potential ambushes, carrying Winchester shotguns as part of their standard gear. These soldiers operated in the dense jungle environment, where their shotguns served as vital close-quarters weapons capable of repelling surprises and ambushes. Nevertheless, after-action reports predominantly focus on the impact of machine guns, rifles, and artillery, which were deemed the primary instruments of victory in the campaign. The dense jungle environment of Guadalcanal presented unique challenges for all weapons, with the shotgun facing some of the most significant difficulties. One major issue concerned the ammunition. The standard paper-hulled shotgun shells proved highly vulnerable to the humid conditions characteristic of the Pacific Islands. The moisture caused the paper cases to absorb water, swelling to the point where they often no longer chambered correctly. This problem persisted throughout the Pacific campaign, severely hampering the reliability of shotguns until a more durable solution was adopted. The intense humidity of the Pacific Islands created a critical ammunition problem that nearly rendered shotguns ineffective. Commercially produced shotgun shells, which employed paper casings, would soak up moisture in the tropical climate. This swelling caused shells that previously chambered smoothly to become jammed or impossible to load. Soldiers and Marines reported cases where shells swelled so extensively that they had to be hammered forcibly into the chamber, a futile and dangerous task during combat, when every second counted. This logistical challenge remained unresolved until March 29, 1945, when the military officially adopted a new type of shell, an all-brass case designated the M19 shell, specifically designed for 12-gauge shotguns and marked as shell shotgun brass 12-gauge number 0 for shotguns to be highly effective, given their close-quarters combat capabilities. However, despite these requests and the apparent advantages of shotguns in such an environment, there is little evidence to suggest that the Japanese military took any formal steps to develop countermeasures specifically aimed at combating American shotguns. This stark absence of tactical recognition is noteworthy, especially considering the intense and often brutal jungle warfare that characterized the campaign in New Guinea from the year 1942 through 1945. Throughout this period, both the Army and Marine units engaged in operations within some of the most unforgiving terrains encountered during the entire conflict, where the complexity of the environment demanded adaptable and innovative tactics. The 32nd and 41st Infantry Divisions, in particular, had identified shotguns as potentially valuable tools based on first-hand experiences from Guadalcanal, a campaign that had demonstrated the close-range lethality and simplicity of shotguns in jungle combat. These units formally requested to be equipped with shotguns, recognizing their suitability for clearing dense foliage, fighting in cramped spaces, and executing rapid, decisive actions against enemy fighters hiding in the thick underbrush. Nevertheless, the official military documentation, both during and after the war, lacked any mention of specific countermeasures to combat shotguns, which suggests a significant oversight or a misjudgment of the weapon's tactical impact. Unlike the Japanese military's well-documented efforts to adapt and develop strategies against American flamethrowers, which involves specialized equipment and training, there is no corresponding evidence of deliberate tactics aimed at neutralizing shotguns' effectiveness. This omission is especially striking when contrasted with the vigorous responses to other American firepower. Japanese records and training manuals instead concentrated on countering machine guns, artillery, and flamethrowers, weapon systems that played prominent roles in the battlefield tactics of the time. These weapons necessitated specific tactical adaptations, such as establishing improved cover, employing smoke screens, or developing specialized equipment to suppress or disable enemy flamethrowers. In contrast, the silence surrounding shotguns in these documents indicates that their presence, while noted on the battlefield, did not reach a level of tactical threat that compelled formal countermeasures. Although individual Japanese soldiers undoubtedly encountered shotguns during their encounters with American forces, particularly in jungle fights, the weapons did not prove to be decisive enough to influence strategic or operational planning on a broader scale. Post-war interrogations with Japanese officers reveal no particular concern or acknowledgement of shotguns as a significant threat, focusing instead on the overwhelming American material superiority, superior firepower, and the integration of combined arms tactics that overwhelmed Japanese defenses. This lack of official focus on shotguns contrasts sharply with the detailed attention paid to countering flamethrowers, which were recognized as a critical and dangerous American weapon system. The Japanese military, through meticulous document analysis, developed specific tactical responses to flamethrowers, including the deployment of specialized equipment, tactical formations, and training programs designed to limit their effectiveness. Such measures underscore the strategic importance attributed to flamethrowers. By comparison, shotguns were simply not seen as a sufficiently dangerous or battlefield-altering weapon to warrant similar efforts. In the context of the broader Pacific theater, the sporadic deployment and limited acknowledgement of shotguns reflect their secondary role within the overall scope of American small arms and combat tactics. Even though these weapons were issued to specific units, primarily military police companies, pioneer battalions, and select rifle squads for specialized tasks, they constituted less than 2% of the small arms within a typical Marine division's inventory. The distribution strategy meant that, although shotguns were present in every major Marine operation, their impact was limited and did not significantly influence the tactical doctrines or enemy responses. The historical record reveals a conspicuous absence of substantive engagement with shotguns in strategic or tactical planning documents from both sides, emphasizing their peripheral role in the broader scope of the conflict. In summary, while individual Japanese soldiers undoubtedly encountered American shotguns in combat, the weapons never attained a level of tactical prominence or threat that would provoke official efforts to develop countermeasures. Their limited presence, combined with the absence of targeted responses in Japanese military documents and training materials, indicates that shotguns, despite their potential utility in close combat, did not fundamentally alter the tactical landscape of the Pacific War. Instead, the documented focus remained on more prominent and immediately threatening American weapon systems, machine guns, artillery, and flamethrowers, that clearly dictated the development of counter-tactics and strategic adjustments throughout the conflict. During the early stages of employing shotguns in combat, there was considerable optimism about their potential on the battlefield. Yet the same issues with ammunition that had troubled Marine forces during their campaign at Guadalcanal resurfaced with even greater severity in the rugged and challenging highlands of New Guinea. The relentless combination of persistent rainfall, frequent river crossings, and extreme levels of humidity created an environment where paper-hold shells, those using traditional paper cartridge cases, almost entirely lost their reliability. These conditions compromised the structural integrity of the ammunition, rendering it prone to misfires and failures at critical moments. As a result, many units that had initially requested to be equipped with shotguns found themselves opting to leave these weapons behind in the safer rear areas. Instead, they relied heavily on more dependable firearms such as the M1 Garand rifles, the Tom Spahn submachine guns, and Browning automatic rifles, which proved more resilient under the demanding jungle conditions. From these experiences, it became clear that what looked impressive on paper, meaning in controlled testing, did not always translate into operational effectiveness in the unpredictable realities of combat in dense jungle terrain. While shotguns demonstrated significant promise during training exercises and simulated combat scenarios, the brutal environment of jungle warfare soon revealed critical limitations that their designers and users had not fully anticipated. These issues persisted until the arrival of the new, more robust brass ammunition in the year of 1945, which helped mitigate some of the reliability problems caused by the moisture and humidity. As the Pacific War advanced and Marine units gained combat experience, they developed specialized tactical doctrines for the effective use of shotguns. These weapons found their most valuable application in just three specific roles on the battlefield. First, they served as a key tool for point security during patrols, providing immediate and devastating firepower against enemy ambushes. Second, shotguns were critical in perimeter defense scenarios, especially at vulnerable infiltration points, where quick, wide-pattern shots could suppress advancing enemy forces. Lastly, they were used effectively for guarding prisoners, where close quarters control was essential. In the context of patrol operations, designated Marine scouts often carried shotguns as the lead team members, positioning themselves to respond instantly to any signs of ambush or sudden attack. The widespread spread of buckshot pellets allowed a single shot to potentially suppress multiple enemy combatants or positions simultaneously, which was invaluable when trying to break contact or hold an advantageous position. This tactic demanded extensive training to master the precise handling of shotguns and fostered a high level of trust among team members, as the shotgunner typically operated well ahead of the rest of the patrol, often out of immediate mutual support range, but ready to deliver rapid, overwhelming fire. Perimeter defense at night constituted another specialized tactical application. Marines assigned to guard posts at likely infiltration points would position shotgun operators in strategic locations, such as narrow trails or entry points into the base or encampment. In these roles, the shotgun's wide shot spread was especially beneficial because of poor visibility and the need for rapid response to any attempted infiltration. The distinctive loud cycle sound of a pump-action shotgun being worked into readiness served as both a warning to potential infiltrators and an effective psychological deterrent, creating an intimidating presence that often made adversaries think twice before attempting an attack. Nevertheless, the limited ammunition capacity of shotguns, typically only a handful of shells, meant that once engaged, the shotgun team needed immediate backup support, usually from rifles, to continue the fight or maintain defensive integrity. In October 1944, as the U.S. forces returned to the Philippines and prepared for urban combat operations in Manila, the 6th Army requested large quantities of shotguns to bolster their tactical options, especially in the dense and complex urban environment. However, the participation of Marine units in the Philippines ground campaign was somewhat limited. Most Marine efforts focused on artillery support in air operations, with only minimal deployment of infantry weapons like shotguns in direct combat. The Army's 37th Infantry Division, which bore the brunt of fighting in Manila, did employ shotguns during house-to-house fighting, as observed in after-action reports. Still, these reports emphasized that flamethrowers and demolition charges were the primary tools used to breach entrenched Japanese positions, with shotguns serving more as supplementary weapons. The urban combat scenarios in Manila showcase both the strengths and weaknesses of shotguns. During close-quarters room-clearing operations, shotguns proved to be highly effective, delivering devastating firepower at very short ranges and quickly neutralizing enemies hiding within structures. However, Japanese defenders soon learned to adapt by barricading themselves within fortified rooms and building barriers that prevented close approach, thereby negating some of the shotgun's advantages. As a result, the weapon's most effective use was in sudden, surprise encounters rather than planned, deliberate assaults. By the time of the February 1945 invasion of Eniwetok Atoll, the Marine Corps officially authorized each division to field a specific number of shotguns, estimated at approximately 918 weapons across 3 divisions. Nonetheless, the island's landscape posed additional challenges. During the fierce and relentless battles across the Pacific Theater in World War II, the tactical landscape was shaped by a variety of specialized weapons and strategies. Among these, shotguns, despite their formidable reputation in certain combat scenarios, found themselves largely sidelined in the face of the complex and often heavily fortified environments encountered by Marine units. The rugged terrain and entrenched Japanese defenses rendered the straightforward application of shotguns less effective, leading to their minimal use in many key engagements. For example, the iconic image of the flag being raised on Mount Suribachi, which has become emblematic of American perseverance and victory, did not occur immediately after close-quarters shotgun assaults. Instead, it followed the concerted efforts of flamethrower and demolition teams, who systematically cleared the Japanese positions through the use of specialized incendiary devices and explosive charges. These teams relied on flame units that could eliminate entrenched enemies efficiently, opening the way for infantry to advance. The Marine units stationed on Eniwetok primarily employed these flamethrowers during cave-clearing operations, utilizing specially designed flame tanks capable of projecting burning fuel up to 40 yards into complex underground networks. This range of flame projection vastly surpassed the reach of shotguns, making flamethrowers the weapon of choice for forcing enemy cave and bunker evacuations. Despite the intense fighting at Eniwetok, official records indicate that the nearly 26,000 American casualties suffered there cannot be directly attributed to the absence or failure of shotgun tactics. The absence of effective shotgun ammunition during this period played a part in limiting their deployment, as the standard brass shells, more reliable and durable, arrived too late to influence the outcome of the Eniwetok campaign significantly. The first units to receive these improved brass shell ammunition, including the M19 shells, only did so in late March of the year 1945, well after the battle had concluded. This delay meant that Marines still faced challenges with the earlier, less reliable paper shells, which often swelled and malfunctioned, further restricting the use of shotguns during one of the war's most intense and demanding encounters. Fast forward to the months of April through June of the same year, the Battle of Okinawa marked a decisive phase in the Pacific Campaign, showcasing the lessons learned throughout the extensive island-hopping strategy. The United States Marine Corps' 1st and 6th Divisions, in particular, were supposed to be equipped with 612 shotguns collectively, now supplied with the improved brass ammunition, theoretically enhancing their combat effectiveness. However, the nature of the terrain and the tactics employed during the Okinawa operation limited opportunities for shotgun use. Okinawa's terrain was characterized by open expanses of rugged land, as well as heavily fortified positions, where Japanese forces adopted a strategy of defense in depth. Unlike earlier battles that involved massive banzai charges, the Japanese military preferred to avoid direct assaults, instead opting for well-prepared defenses in bunkers and extensive cave systems within the Shuri line. These fortified positions kept American infantry at extended ranges, rendering close-range weapons like shotguns less practical. During this prolonged engagement, Marine units relied heavily on coordinated tactics integrating tanks and infantry, with flame tanks providing crucial close support. The flame tanks proved especially effective against the Japanese fortified positions, and their use became a hallmark of Okinawa's combat operations. When shotguns were indeed employed on Okinawa, it was mostly during the final phase of the campaign, when Marines systematically cleared the remaining Japanese defenders from their prepared positions. These weapons played a key role in the closing stages of the battle, helping to eliminate the last pockets of resistance. Shotguns also found auxiliary roles beyond direct combat, particularly among military police units tasked with managing the considerable civilian population movements that accompanied the battle. These units used shotguns in various crowd control and security operations, although such applications accounted for only a small fraction of the weapon's overall utility in this campaign. Remarkably, despite the wealth of documentation and detailed accounts of combat during World War II, specific reports highlighting the employment of shotguns remain surprisingly limited. Veteran interviews stored within the Library of Congress Veterans History Project, which collectively number in the thousands, seldom mention shotgun use in combat scenarios. Similarly, the extensive oral histories maintained by the National Museum of the Pacific War, encompassing over 4,000 personal accounts, contain almost no references to shotgun tactics or incidents. Even esteemed memoirs such as Eugene Sledge's With the Old Breed, widely regarded as one of the most comprehensive and insightful narratives of the Pacific War, do not mention shotguns at all. Sledge served in a rifle company at Peleliu in Okinawa, but made no reference to this weapon type. Likewise, Robert Leakey's Helmet for My Pillow, another highly regarded account of Marine combat experiences, mentions his service during the Guadalcanal campaign, but omits any discussion of shotgun use. These notable absences from detailed personal chronicles suggest that shotguns occupied a secondary or peripheral role in Marine combat operations, rather than a central one. The overall historical record, therefore, underscores. During the course of World War II, the role of the shotgun within the vast and complex spectrum of military weaponry remains a subject shrouded in nuance and subtlety. Although a handful of historical references do mention shotguns, they tend to portray these firearms as tools valuable for very specific, narrow circumstances rather than as primary combat weapons designed for widespread use on the battlefield. This limited documentation suggests that, in the grand scope of wartime conflicts, shotguns were not the mainstay of combat arsenals, but rather specialized devices suited to particular tasks. Veteran accounts offer additional perspective, recalling that shotguns found a niche in scenarios such as night security patrols and ambushes in dense jungles. These environments demanded close-quarters accuracy and stopping power, making the shotgun a useful tool in such contexts. However, the same veterans, and corroborated by official records, affirm that the ultimate determinants of battlefield success were rifles, machine guns, and mortars. These more powerful and versatile weapons played a decisive role in shaping combat outcomes, overshadowing shotguns in strategic importance. From an industrial standpoint, the production figures during the war underscore America's capacity to manufacture shotguns on a large scale. For instance, Winchester, one of the leading firearm manufacturers, produced roughly 25,000 Model 97s and between 60,000 and 80,000 Model 12 shotguns under military contracts. Other companies like Remington, Stevens, and Ithaca also contributed manufacturing efforts, manufacturing thousands more. These numbers reflect the tremendous industrial might of the United States and its ability to supply a multitude of weapons. Yet, despite this substantial output, these weapons did not necessarily see widespread use on the front lines. Much of this production was diverted to roles that, while vital to military operations, were not directly related to frontline combat. Many shotguns served within training facilities, guard units, and rear area security operations, functions essential for maintaining discipline, safeguarding logistics, and preventing infiltration. Naval vessels carried shotguns for security, boarding procedures, and guarding ships, whereas land-based air bases deployed them for perimeter defense against potential intruders. Such roles were crucial to the overall security architecture, but did not involve traditional combat engagement. This disparity between manufacturing capacity and actual battlefield employment suggests that, although America possessed the technological and industrial capacity to equip every Marine squad with shotguns, practical limitations constrained their use. Ammunition shortages, tactical doctrines that favored other weapons, logistical difficulties, and strategic preferences all contributed to the shotgun's relegation to secondary roles. As a result, the shotgun remained a specialized tool rather than becoming a staple firearm in combat scenarios. To truly grasp the extent of its deployment, it is instructive to compare the shotgun's use with that of more prominent weapons like the flamethrower, which emerged as a key asset in cave and bunker clearing. For instance, the M2 flamethrower, introduced in 1943, appears repeatedly in detailed accounts of combat operations, with Marines meticulously documenting their use of over 27,000 gallons of flamethrower fuel during operations at Iwo Jima alone. These records highlight the flamethrower's tactical effectiveness and its critical role in clearing fortified positions. In stark contrast, records of shotgun ammunition expenditure during similar operations are conspicuously absent. No detailed account references the quantity of shotgun shells used or their tactical impact, suggesting a lack of systematic deployment or significance in combat. Meanwhile, weapons like the Browning automatic rifle, known as the BAR, served as the backbone of the Marine Squad's firepower by 1944. The extensive documentation surrounding the employment of the BAR, its tactical roles, ammunition consumption, and combat effectiveness, stands as a testament to its integral place in Marine infantry operations. Furthermore, the organizational structure of Marine squads itself underscores this disparity. By the year of 1944, each squad typically included 3 bear teams, with detailed training programs and clearly defined tactical doctrines supporting their use. This level of integration and doctrinal emphasis contrasts sharply with the shotgun, which despite being theoretically authorized within certain tactical frameworks, never achieved similar doctrinal significance or extensive combat documentation. Even the relatively rare M1918 Browning machine gun generated more detailed combat reports than shotguns, with veterans recalling specific instances of its employment, ammunition usage, and battlefield effectiveness. These accounts lend credence to the idea that, despite official authorization and production figures, shotguns rarely played a substantial role in combat engagements. The lack of comparable combat narratives for shotguns over time indicates that their utilization remained largely limited to peripheral roles rather than frontline fighting. This disparity between the mythologized image of the shotgun, often romanticized in popular culture, and the documented historical record reflects broader patterns seen in World War II historiography. Films, sensational stories, and media influenced by Hollywood and other sources tended to elevate the mythos of certain weapons, including shotguns, portraying them as glamorous or decisive tools of combat. However, the reality, supported by official records, veteran testimonies, and operational reports, reveals a different story where shotguns served primarily in specialized secondary capacities, and very rarely their visual impact and the dramatic, close-range effects they produce naturally lent themselves to myth-making. During and after World War II, movies often depicted Marines sweeping through Japanese positions with shotguns in hand, portraying these weapons as emblematic tools of the Pacific Theater. These vivid images left a lasting impression on the public consciousness, despite the fact that they were not entirely supported by primary source evidence. Over time, video games, documentaries, and popular histories continued to reinforce this romanticized image, elevating shotguns to iconic status within the narrative of Pacific warfare. This cultural elevation persisted even though historical records show that their actual usage and significance were far more limited and nuanced. This process of mythologizing tends to gloss over the more mundane reality that shotguns primarily served auxiliary roles rather than being frontline weapons of decisive importance. The stories constructed around them serve a narrative purpose. They add a sense of gritty close-quarters combat and provide a technological contrast between American innovations and Japanese defenses. While these stories contribute to a compelling narrative, they can distort the truth, which is that although shotguns were sometimes present on the battlefield and occasionally effective, they never played a pivotal role in shaping battle outcomes to the degree that rifles, machine guns, mortars, or flamethrowers did. Examining the few veteran accounts that do exist offers a more accurate perspective on how shotguns were actually employed during the conflict. Marines who carried shotguns often described them as useful tools in specific situations, such as clearing jungle terrain or defending positions at night, but also acknowledged that these weapons could be burdensome in broader combat scenarios. Their limited ammunition capacity, weight, and specialized role meant that many servicemen preferred rifles for conventional engagements and routine tasks. One Marine veteran, interviewed in 1985, recounted carrying a Model 97 shotgun during the Guadalcanal campaign. He described it as effective for night watch duties and navigating jungle paths, but emphasized that at longer ranges, it was ineffective. When gunfire erupted, he explained, a rifle was the preferred weapon. You couldn't really engage at a distance with a shotgun, he noted. This practical insight underscores the inherent limitations of shotguns in diverse combat environments, showing they excelled in niche roles but could not replace more versatile firearms. In fact, shotguns proved most effective when used within their specific niche, rather than as primary armament. Another veteran from the 2nd Marine Division recalled the distribution of shotguns during the campaign. Each squad was supposed to carry one, but in practice, half the time, the weapons remained with company officers or supply units because they were considered too specialized or unnecessary for everyday use. This anecdote highlights the gap between formal policy and battlefield reality, illustrating how many units owned shotguns but relied more heavily on rifles, which offered greater flexibility for regular combat. A significant development in shotgun ammunition came in March 1945, when the military adopted brass-cased M19 shells. These new rounds addressed the moisture and corrosion problems that had historically hampered shotgun effectiveness in the humid, salt-saturated environments of the Pacific. Theoretically, this innovation could have enhanced the utility of shotguns in combat, especially during prolonged campaigns. However, by the time these shells were issued, the strategic situation had shifted considerably. The island of Iwo Jima had been secured, and the invasion of Okinawa was imminent, just weeks away. The Philippines campaign had largely concluded, and subsequent battles would be fought with tried-and-true tactics, relying heavily on established weapons and methods. Even so, the brass-cased ammunition proved valuable for occupation duties and future operations, such as the planned invasion of Japan. Military planners preparing for Operation Downfall, the anticipated invasion of the Japanese homeland, requested large quantities of shotguns for urban combat scenarios within Japanese cities. They envisioned shotguns as effective tools for clearing buildings and close-quarters fighting, where their stopping power and ease of maneuverability would be advantageous. However, the deployment of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki effectively eliminated the need for such an invasion, rendering these plans moot. Consequently, the brass ammunition's potential impact remained largely untested in combat, and the additional investment in shotgun modernization did not see widespread battlefield application. Post-war analyses have suggested that, had the brass shells been available earlier, the effectiveness of shotguns in combat could have been dramatically improved, particularly in urban warfare. Yet these are mere speculations, what might have been, since the actual historical record shows that such possibilities remained unrealized due to timing and strategic shifts. Throughout most of the Pacific War, despite their dramatic potential and cultural prominence, shotguns faced significant practical limitations that curtailed their battlefield role. Their reputation as close combat weapons often overshadowed the reality that their use was largely confined to limited roles and specific situations. While they could be effective in niche applications, they never supplanted the more versatile and firepower-rich weapons like rifles and machine guns, which defined the outcome of most campaigns. During the course of World War II, many military analysts and strategists faced significant challenges related to the practical effectiveness of various weapon systems, including the shotgun. The reliability issues of certain ammunition types used in shotguns posed serious constraints on their overall utility in combat situations, often preventing them from becoming reliable combat tools. This mechanical unreliability, compounded by the absence of specific Japanese countermeasures designed to neutralize or mitigate the threat posed by shotguns, provides an intriguing piece of historical context. It underscores how significant defensive adaptations were made against conventional American weapons, such as the deployment of overhead cover to protect against mortar fire, spider holes created to ambush tanks, and reverse slope defensive positions intended to evade naval artillery strikes. In contrast, the lack of comparable tactical measures specifically aimed at countering shotguns suggests that, for the Japanese forces, these weapons did not achieve the same level of strategic impact or threat. Throughout the Pacific theater, Japanese tactical evolution was marked by innovative efforts aimed at overcoming American military superiority, which often manifested as a focus on making the best use of terrain and establishing layered defensive systems. For example, their strategic shift from static beach defenses to more sophisticated inland fortifications was designed to slow down or halt American advances, while the construction of interconnected tunnel networks allowed for movement and concealment of troops and supplies. Additionally, a notable change in tactics was the eventual abandonment of the Banzai Charge, a historically aggressive, massed infantry attack, reflecting a reassessment of close-quarters assault effectiveness in the face of American firepower. These adaptations, however, primarily targeted the broader American firepower arsenal rather than specific weapons like shotguns. Post-war analyses of Japanese military tactics and strategies revealed a comprehensive examination of American artillery coordination, naval gunfire support, and the integration of tank and infantry operations. Yet, remarkably, there was little to no discussion of shotguns within these extensive war studies. This absence suggests that shotguns were perceived as having a negligible influence on the tactical decisions and battlefield outcomes, further implying their limited role in the broader scope of combat operations. One of the most telling indicators of the shotgun's marginal role in the conflict is the complete lack of statistical data concerning its effectiveness. During World War II, armies amassed vast quantities of operational data, tracking ammunition expenditure, casualty correlations, weapon effectiveness, and battlefield efficiency. Despite this, there are no reliable records linking the employment of shotguns to enemy casualties or to specific tactical successes. The operational research units responsible for analyzing the varied performance of weapon systems during the war produced detailed reports on artillery accuracy, mortar efficiency, and small arms use, including probabilities of hit, casualty rates, and ammunition consumption. These documents provide a clear picture of the combat value of most weapons, yet strangely, there are no comparable studies or statistical records for shotguns, which points towards their infrequent or inconsequential use on the battlefield. Even informal recollections from veterans support this conclusion. While soldiers and Marines often provide estimates of the number of rifle rounds fired, grenades thrown, or mortar shells used during their campaigns, similar numerical estimates for shotgun rounds, be they buckshot or slugs, are glaringly absent. This void in the record indicates that shotguns rarely played a prominent role in actual combat operations, despite the near-constant presence of these weapons in Marine units and the extensive training provided to their personnel. Marine military training camps placed a strong emphasis on preparing soldiers to employ shotguns effectively. Marines learned techniques such as slamfire, a method for rapidly firing multiple rounds, practiced shooting scenarios set in jungle environments, and qualified in the use of buckshot and slug ammunition. Such rigorous training fostered an expectation that shotguns would serve as versatile and crucial weapons in a variety of combat situations, especially in close-quarters encounters. However, the reality of combat situations proved markedly different from these controlled training exercises. The conditions at training facilities like Camp Pendleton, with its predictable targets and lack of real enemy fire, did not replicate the unpredictability, humidity, and environmental challenges encountered during actual campaigns in the Pacific, such as the jungles of Guadalcanal or the volcanic ash of Eniwetok. Furthermore, combat engagements at extended ranges or in open terrain, common scenarios in the Pacific, often did not necessitate close-range weapons like shotguns. Instead, most encounters involved engagements at greater distances, where the effectiveness of shotguns diminishes significantly. The close-quarters combat scenarios that were emphasized in training rarely materialized to the extent expected, leading to a disconnect between the detailed preparation Marines received and the practical realities they faced on the battlefield. This disparity highlights the limitations of training assumptions and underscores why shotguns, despite their strategic potential, remained marginal in actual combat operations. During the course of the Second World War, the use and deployment of shotguns within the United States Marine Corps bore striking similarities to other aspects of wartime experience, revealing a complex interplay between tactical assumptions, logistical constraints, and cultural symbolism. Initial training programs dedicated considerable time to preparing Marines to wield their shotguns effectively, emphasizing techniques that would be relevant should close-quarters combat arise. Yet despite this thorough preparation, actual encounters in combat zones rarely aligned with the expectations that had driven such training efforts. In particular, a significant portion of the training focused on bayonet fighting, a skill that later proved to have limited practical application in the Pacific campaigns, where hand-to-hand combat was infrequent and often avoided through strategic maneuvering. The emphasis on bayonet techniques reflected a broader willingness to prepare for close combat scenarios, even when the likelihood of such encounters was minimal. Meanwhile, the development of chemical warfare defenses and related training modules became somewhat moot in the theater, as chemical attacks, despite being a dire threat in earlier conflicts, failed to materialize in the Pacific theater, rendering the extensive preparation for gas warfare largely unnecessary. Similarly, the training regimen for shotguns aimed to ready Marines for urban warfare situations, environments characterized by confined spaces, short engagement distances, and a need for rapid clearance of rooms and barricaded positions. These conditions appeared, on paper, to be ideal for shotguns, which excel at close range. However, when combat in places like Manila or Naha actualized, the logistical realities and tactical realities diverged sharply from initial expectations. The preparation often did not translate into widespread or impactful employment in actual urban combat. One of the most significant limiting factors was the logistical challenge associated with supplying shotgun ammunition. Each 12-gauge shell, weighing approximately twice as much as a standard rifle cartridge and occupying roughly 3 times the space, made the transportation and storage of shotgun ammunition inefficient. A Marine could carry around 80 rounds of rifle ammunition within the same weight and space constraints that would only accommodate about 36 shotgun shells. Consequently, supply vessels, overburdened by the demands of more critical ammunition types, such as rifle rounds, machine gun belts, and mortar shells, deprioritized specialized shotgun loads. The limited cargo capacity of landing craft further compounded this issue, as each shipment of ammunition required justification and prioritization. Operators and logisticians naturally favored more versatile and higher volume munitions that could serve multiple roles on the battlefield. As a result, shotgun shells, especially those intended for specialized tasks, received a lower priority compared to general-purpose rifle and machine gun ammunition. This logistical reality meant that even when shotguns were present in units, their ammunition supplies were often severely restricted, sometimes limited to just 1 or 2 boxes intended to last through entire operations. Veterans who participated in these campaigns vividly recall that their shotgun supplies were often scarce, with only a handful of boxes allocated for entire battles or campaigns. This scarcity discouraged their liberal and innovative use, effectively reducing the weapon's impact on combat outcomes. Despite plans and expectations that shotguns would excel in urban environments, such as dense city battles in Manila and Naha, actual combat experiences demonstrated the limitations of this assumption. In urban settings where tight spaces, short engagement ranges, and the need to clear rooms swiftly were assumed to favor shotguns, the reality was quite different. Japanese defenders frequently established fortified positions, interconnected firing lines, and booby traps that created kill zones hostile to close-range approaches. These defenses rendered Marines unable to close the distance necessary for shotguns to be most effective. Fortified barricades, overlapping fields of fire, and well-hidden ambush points kept Marines at ranges where shotguns simply could not deliver their lethal potential. In places where Marines did manage to close in, or where urban combat devolved into close-quarters fighting, veterans have noted a tendency to rely on alternative weapons such as grenades, Thompson submachine guns, and flamethrowers. These weapons offered comparable or superior effectiveness at close range, with the added benefits of greater firing capacity, versatility, and ease of use in chaotic environments. For example, the Thompson submachine gun, with its 30-round magazine capacity, considerably more than the 6-round capacity of the traditional shotgun, proved crucial during sustained firefights. Its ability to deliver a high volume of rounds made it a more practical and adaptable choice in many urban combat scenarios. Despite the minimal documented impact of shotguns on Japanese military tactics and strategy, their presence in the minds of American troops and the broader military mythology grew disproportionately large. The image of a Marine wielding a trench gun to clear Japanese positions became an iconic symbol of American resilience and ingenuity, even though the historical record shows that such moments were relatively few and often exaggerated in retellings. This cultural and mythological significance surpassed the weapon's actual contribution on the battlefield. The shotgun came to embody American pragmatism, an invention rooted in hunting and civilian life, being repurposed for military use in a way that defied traditional European military conventions. This narrative resonated strongly with the American self-image as of the military culture of Japan, particularly during the era leading up to and including the Second World War, was deeply rooted in a specific conception of what constituted a proper and effective weapon on the battlefield. This cultural framework prioritized rifles, machine guns, and artillery as the primary tools for combat, reflecting both strategic doctrines and technological preferences. Interestingly, within this mindset, shotguns were entirely absent from the array of weapons considered suitable or necessary for warfare. They simply never entered the official military thinking as appropriate tools for engagement in combat scenarios, especially those envisioned in the context of large-scale conventional warfare. This oversight, or what some might interpret as a critical blind spot, has often been blamed for Japan's lack of preparedness to employ shotguns in combat situations. The prevailing narrative suggests that this cultural neglect left Japanese forces ill-equipped for environments where close-quarters combat might have favored shotgun use. However, closer examination of the historical record indicates a more nuanced reality. The limited actual deployment of shotguns in Japanese military operations was not solely a consequence of cultural or doctrinal neglect, but was primarily due to the inherent constraints in specific tactical conditions that determine whether a weapon can be effectively employed in combat. In other words, technological limitations and battlefield realities played a decisive role in restricting shotguns from becoming mainstay weapons, rather than a blanket cultural dismissiveness. Indeed, the story of the shotgun in wartime exemplifies the intricate and often complex relationship between advancing technology and military doctrine. While shotguns, by design, proved to be devastating at close range, especially in dense jungle environments, where their spread and stopping power could be selectively advantageous, their practical effectiveness depended on a range of tactical conditions. These conditions, such as the need for specific combat situations, suitable training, and favorable terrain, rarely occurred in the unpredictable chaos of actual warfare. As the Pacific War progressed, Marine doctrine evolved significantly, adapting to the brutal realities of island-hopping campaigns across dense jungles and rugged terrains. Nevertheless, despite their proven lethality in theory, shotguns never achieved a fully integrated position within the broader tactical systems of the Marines. Instead, they remained supplementary weapons, designated for particular tasks or situations, rather than being embedded as core components of squad-level firepower. This reflected a pragmatic approach rooted in actual combat experience, which demonstrated that shotguns, though useful in certain roles, did not warrant the same doctrinal development as rifles or machine guns. The marginalization of shotguns within military doctrine was not due to technological shortcomings, but was rooted in the practical lessons learned in the field. In contrast, weapons such as flamethrowers experienced a notable revolution in tactics, particularly in bunker-clearing operations. The flamethrower's success in destroying fortified positions prompted extensive doctrinal development, establishing detailed and systematic procedures for its employment. Such evolution was driven by clear tactical advantages and consistent battlefield results, which reinforced the weapon's importance within the operational framework. Shotguns, despite their theoretical potential in close-quarters combat, did not stimulate a similar evolutionary leap within military tactics. Their deployment remained sporadic and limited, and subsequent doctrinal changes did not significantly incorporate them into standard operating procedures. Military administrative records from the period provide additional insights into the actual usage of shotguns. Requisition documents, repair logs, and replacement requests serve as documentary evidence of how extensively, or more often how sparingly, shotguns were employed in combat. Analysis of these logistical records reveals a stark contrast between shotguns and other small arms. Parts and components for rifles and machine guns appear consistently in supply and maintenance records, reflecting the heavy and ongoing use of these weapons in combat. Conversely, requests for shotgun parts are notably rare, pointing to minimal wear and tear from actual battle conditions. Armorer reports from Marine divisions echo this pattern. Rifles and machine guns demanded constant attention for repairs and cleaning due to the high volume of firing and exposure to the elements. In contrast, shotguns primarily required routine cleaning, often because of storage-related corrosion, rather than extensive firing or combat wear. These maintenance trends suggest that most shotguns remained in armories or storage facilities much longer than they spent in the heat of battle. The ammunition requisition data further supports this conclusion. Divisions requisitioned millions of rounds for rifles and hundreds of thousands for machine guns, illustrating their central role in combat operations. Meanwhile, requests for shotgun shells were modest, often limited to training exercises or non-combat scenarios, further emphasizing their peripheral role. The administrative and logistical records, combined with veteran accounts, paint a consistent picture of limited actual combat employment for shotguns during the Pacific campaigns. When compared with the experiences of other nations engaged in jungle warfare, this pattern remains evident. British and Australian forces operating in similar environments relied heavily on rifles and submachine guns, with minimal use of shotguns. Their combat effectiveness in these challenging conditions without shotguns demonstrates that these weapons were not essential for success in Pacific jungle warfare. Similarly, the Soviet forces, fighting across a variety of terrains, ranging from urban battlegrounds like Stalingrad to rural areas in Kursk, did not. Despite facing a glaring and urgent need for more effective and reliable weaponry, the deployment of shotguns during major conflicts such as World War II, War II, appears to have been somewhat modest and less central than one might initially assume. This broader international perspective suggests that within the spectrum of combat tactics, shotguns were regarded primarily as one of many possible options, rather than as an indispensable or game-changing tool for soldiers on the battlefield. Different nations, operating under unique doctrines and resource constraints, achieve comparable combat results not necessarily through the widespread use of shotguns, but through a variety of weapon combinations tailored to their specific strategies and circumstances. This diversity in armament underscores a crucial point: the tactical influence of shotguns, despite American manufacturing capacity, which produced them in significant numbers, remained relatively limited. They were not the core of infantry tactics, but were part of a larger toolkit, with their impact on the overall battlefield largely marginal in comparison to other weapon systems. Following the end of World War II, military analysts conducted thorough evaluations of the various weapons used during the conflict, aiming to determine which should continue to be developed and prioritized for future engagements. For the United States Army, detailed assessments were carried out by the Infantry Board, which scrutinized each weapon's performance and potential. Their studies identified rifles, machine guns, mortars, and recoilless rifles as top priorities for ongoing research and development efforts, given their proven effectiveness and versatility. In stark contrast, shotguns garnered only minimal attention in these post-war evaluations. This lack of focus suggests that, based on their wartime performance, shotguns did not possess enough battlefield utility to justify significant investment or further development efforts. During the Korean War, the limited employment of shotguns continued to reflect their marginal role in combat operations, especially given the nature of the conflicts fought in close quarters. Despite the intense proximity of combat in urban and jungle environments, shotguns were rarely utilized as a standard weapon. Marine rifle squads and patrol units often relied on more traditional weapons, such as the M1 Grand Rifle, the Browning Automatic Rifle BAR, and carbines rather than shotguns for their patrol and combat functions. This pragmatic choice made by seasoned veterans, who had experienced the Pacific Theater, indicates a clear assessment. The real-world utility of shotguns, in their standard form, was limited. Their capabilities were perhaps more theoretical than practical, especially in the varied and often unpredictable conditions of combat. In the Vietnam War, however, there was a noticeable resurgence in shotgun use, particularly with the adaptation of commercially available models modified for jungle patrols and close-quarters combat. Nonetheless, even in these scenarios, shotguns were generally viewed as specialized tools suited for point men, tunnel rats, or specific tactical niches, rather than as part of the standard individual infantryman's arsenal. The emphasis remained on weapons tailored for specific roles within the environment, such as clearing tunnels or engaging enemies at extremely close range, rather than widespread adoption across combat units. This pattern of limited and specialized use persisted into the modern era, reaffirming that shotguns serve best in niche military roles, rather than as general-purpose combat weapons. Historical evidence also sheds light on encounters between Japanese forces and American shotguns during the Pacific Theater of World War II. While shotguns were indeed present in many Marine units and used during the extensive campaigns across the Pacific, their actual employment in combat situations was quite restricted. Several factors contributed to this, including ammunition supply problems, tactical constraints on their use, and the overall doctrinal approaches that prioritized other weapon types. The late adoption of brass ammunition in March of 1945, which could have improved reliability and ease of use, came too late to significantly influence combat outcomes involving shotguns. Furthermore, the Japanese military never developed specific countermeasures to address the threat posed by shotguns, primarily because shotguns did not reach a level of tactical impact that would warrant targeted defenses. Japanese military documents, training manuals, and post-war analyses all show scant references to shotguns, reinforcing the idea that these weapons played only a marginal role. Their influence on the battlefield was negligible, and the general evolution of Japanese tactics responded more to the cumulative firepower of American forces rather than focusing on countering individual weapon types like shotguns. Another revealing aspect is the disparity between the number of shotguns officially authorized and their actual use in combat. Marine divisions, for example, were authorized to carry around 306 shotguns each, a significant figure on paper. Yet most of these weapons remained assigned to secondary roles such as guard duty, training exercises, or rear area security rather than frontline combat. Veterans' accounts, when shotguns are mentioned at all, tend to describe them as useful in certain specific circumstances, but clearly not as primary weapons for combat personnel. Their utility was recognized in limited contexts rather than as decisive instruments of war. Finally, the prevalent mythologizing surrounding the role of shotguns in the Pacific War often far exceeds what historical records support. Popular culture has elevated these weapons to iconic status, portraying them as central to the fighting spirit and heroism of the grand landscape of warfare. It is widely recognized that the ultimate outcomes of battles are often determined by a combination of powerful artillery, naval gunfire support, strategic airstrikes, flamethrowers, and the precision of infantry tactics. While rifles, machine guns, mortars, and flamethrowers played decisive roles in shaping the course of conflicts, other weapons, such as shotguns, occupied more specialized niche functions within the military apparatus. The story of the shotgun in wartime, particularly during the Pacific theater of World War II, offers valuable insights into the broader themes of military innovation, adaptation, and the often complex relationship between technical capability and tactical effectiveness. Despite possessing certain theoretical advantages, shotguns exemplify how technological potential alone cannot guarantee battlefield success. To be genuinely effective, any weapon system must be seamlessly integrated into the overarching doctrines, logistical support mechanisms, and comprehensive training programs established by the armed forces. In other words, mere possession of a weapon with favorable features does not automatically translate into improved combat performance unless it is part of a well-developed tactical framework. Historical evidence demonstrates that, although shotguns held certain theoretical benefits, such as their ability to deliver stopping power in close-quarters combat, they ultimately failed to surmount practical limitations that restricted their widespread employment. The Japanese military, for instance, failed to anticipate the potential utility of shotguns in countering American infantry tactics. However, this oversight proved largely inconsequential because shotguns never reached a level of tactical significance sufficient to exploit such gaps. Their limited impact was rooted not in a lack of foresight, but in the subdued role they played during actual combat operations. In assessing the importance of various weapon systems in the Pacific conflict, it is clear that the Japanese military concentrated its attention on those tools that historically and practically dictated the outcome of battles. Artillery, naval gunfire, aircraft, and flamethrowers received the necessary emphasis because their strategic value and proven battlefield effectiveness could not be overlooked. Conversely, the United States' industrial capacity enabled the mass production of military shotguns, symbolizing manufacturing strength rather than actual combat advantage. Producing vast quantities of shotguns showed technological prowess, but this manufacturing success did not necessarily translate into tactical dominance on the battlefield. Indeed, the ability to produce large numbers of weapons vastly outpaced the ability to employ them effectively under the challenging conditions of the Pacific theater. The disparity between weapon manufacturing and effective battlefield use underscores an important lesson. Industrial might alone is insufficient to ensure tactical superiority. The encounter between Japanese infantry and American shotguns during World War II ultimately illustrates a broader myth about weaponry, an assumption that any weapon, regardless of context, would inevitably alter the outcome of engagements. In reality, while shotguns occasionally demonstrated utility in specific, limited situations, they never achieved the kind of devastating tactical impact that popular narratives sometimes suggest. The Japanese forces in particular were indeed unprepared for the presence of shotguns. This lack of readiness, however, proved largely irrelevant to the broader scope of the conflict, because shotguns occupied a marginal role rather than a decisive one. Official military records, production logs, training manuals, and organizational tables confirm that shotguns were present within Marine units and used in certain occasions. Still, the scarcity of detailed combat accounts, statistical data, and documented countermeasures indicates that their employment was limited and sporadic at best. Veterans who carried shotguns in the field often recalled them as specialized tools, useful in specific situations such as clearing jungles or close-quarters encounters. These accounts reinforce the idea that shotguns served as supplementary weapons rather than primary instruments capable of turning the tide of battles. Furthermore, the delay in adopting reliable, moisture-resistant ammunition, particularly the introduction of brass cartridges in March of 1945, meant that effective weaponry arrived late in the conflict. By the time such ammunition was available, the outcome of the war had largely been predetermined. The final campaigns in the Pacific had largely shifted towards island-hopping strategies that relied heavily on combined arms tactics, overwhelming firepower, and naval dominance rather than close-range shotgun encounters. The widespread reliance on aircraft, artillery, and naval fire support rendered the marginal role of shotguns even more insignificant. The Japanese military's strategic focus on countering the weapons that truly dictated battle results, such as artillery, naval gunfire, aircraft, and flamethrowers, reflects a realistic and accurate tactical assessment rather than a glaring oversight or failure. In conclusion, while shotguns were present and occasionally effective in specific combat situations, they never achieved the kind of overwhelming tactical impact that some stories and popular accounts might suggest. The reality was that the Japanese forces, unprepared for the sporadic use of shotguns, found their influence to be minimal. The record, comprising production figures, training manuals, and veterans' recollections, confirms that shotguns played a limited auxiliary role rather than a decisive one in shaping the outcomes of American engagements in the Pacific. The delayed introduction of reliable ammunition, combined with the broader shift towards modern combined arms tactics, ultimately diminished the importance of close. Throughout the course of the Second World War, military forces on all sides continually adapted and refined their tactics, often incorporating specialized weaponry to address specific combat scenarios. Among these tools, shotguns found a niche role, particularly in the context of the Pacific theater. These firearms, traditionally associated with civilian use or law enforcement, were granted a certain degree of official deployment by the American military. Their primary functions included breaching fortified doors, providing a less lethal option for crowd control or close-quarters engagement, and handling specific combat situations that demanded a high level of precision at very short ranges. Despite their specialized application, it is important to recognize that the contemporary utilization of shotguns by Allied forces was comparatively limited when viewed against the broader scope of wartime weaponry and tactics. This limited modern employment of shotguns in combat bears a much closer resemblance to how they were actually used during the Second World War, particularly in the Pacific Campaign, than the exaggerated and often romanticized stories that have become embedded in popular culture and historical mythology. Rather than being a core element of assault or frontline combat, shotguns served important but narrowly focused roles, acting as supplementary tools rather than the primary weapons that decided battlefield outcomes. This subtle distinction highlights how the popular imagination tends to transform minor historical facts into grand narratives, often stretching the truth beyond its factual boundaries. The vivid and compelling image of American Marines wielding shotguns to clear entrenched Japanese positions captures the imagination because it aligns with storytelling needs that prioritize drama and heroism over strict accuracy. Such stories are crafted to evoke pride, resilience, and resourcefulness, traits that resonate culturally and symbolically. These narratives serve a broader purpose in shaping perceptions of American military ingenuity, showcasing a flexible, pragmatic approach to warfare that favored adaptation and innovation. However, to fully understand the true role of shotguns during the Pacific War, it is essential to delineate verified facts from the myths that have accumulated over decades, an effort that requires careful analysis of original military documents, veteran testimonies, and historical research. In reality, while these weapons were present in the theater, authorized for use, and occasionally effective in their designated roles, they never attained the tactical significance that popular stories often claim. The Japanese infantry, for instance, likely never anticipated encountering 12-gauge American shotguns during assaults on heavily fortified positions. Nonetheless, the element of surprise, while noteworthy, proved ultimately inconsequential in the broader context of battlefield success, which was predominantly determined by superior American firepower, logistical support, and the effective coordination of combined arms tactics. The overall victory was rooted in these overwhelming industrial and military advantages, not in isolated incidents involving shotguns. Historical accounts confirm that shotguns played a much more modest role than the mythic narratives suggest. They were used as specialized tools suited for particular situations, such as clearing trenches or rooms, yet their effectiveness was hampered by ammunition shortages that only became more acute late in the war. As a result, they mainly served as secondary weapons, supplementing larger units rather than replacing primary firearm systems. Their influence on the outcome of the Pacific conflict was negligible in comparison to the decisive factors of logistics, air and naval power, and the relentless advance of American ground forces. While this more subdued reality may lack the excitement and flair of mythologized tales, it offers a more truthful perspective rooted in primary sources, veteran interviews, and official records. The true story of Japanese encounters with American shotguns underscores the importance of distinguishing between the constructed legends of warfare and the actual conditions experienced by soldiers on the ground. It is a reminder that much of what becomes popularized in military history is shaped by storytelling traditions designed to entertain and inspire, often at the expense of factual precision. That said, the cultural significance of shotguns in the American wartime narrative transcended their tactical use. They came to symbolize American pragmatism, ingenuity, and adaptability, traits that resonated deeply during a conflict that demanded resourcefulness. Despite their limited documented impact in combat, shotguns achieved a symbolic stature, representing the American ability to make effective use of whatever tools were available in the face of adversity. This disparity between their mythic image and their actual battlefield efficacy exemplifies how popular historical narratives often prioritize drama over mundane truth. The Japanese soldiers, who may have been genuinely surprised at the presence of 12-gauge shotguns in combat zones, were correct to feel caught off guard. However, they were misguided in believing that these weapons could significantly influence the outcome of battles. The weapons that ultimately crippled Japanese defenses in the Pacific were far more powerful. Overwhelming industrial capacity, superior logistics networks, well-coordinated combined arms operations, and the relentless naval and air superiority of the United States. These elements combined to secure victory long before the occasional blast of buckshot could turn the tide in any engagement. Examining the story of the shotguns in the Pacific War reveals not a tale of tactical innovation driven by unexpected weaponry, but rather a complex interplay of cultural perception, myth-making, and military reality. The narrative underscores how stories of unconventional weapons often serve to highlight American, throughout the course of the Pacific War, the interplay between military capability, the strategic deployment of combat forces, and the deeply ingrained historical mythology surrounding the conflict played a crucial role in shaping the course and perception of this intense and transformative chapter of World War II. The development of military capability during this period was marked by remarkable innovation and unprecedented scale, as each belligerent sought to leverage every technological advantage available. From the early days of the conflict, nations engaged in rapid advancements in aircraft, naval vessels, and ground equipment, all aimed at gaining superiority in an environment characterized by vast oceanic expanses and island territories. These technological strides not only elevated the military potential of respective forces, but also contributed to the escalating intensity of the campaigns. Combat employment during the Pacific War was characterized by complex, strategic operations that often involved amphibious assaults on heavily fortified island positions. The planning and execution of these operations required meticulous coordination and a deep understanding of the unique geographical challenges presented by the Pacific theater. Forces had to adapt swiftly to unfamiliar terrains, employing innovative tactics such as island-hopping campaigns that targeted key strategic islands, each one serving as a stepping stone toward the ultimate goal of defeating Axis powers. These campaigns extended over many months and involved brutal, close-quarters fighting, often pushing soldiers and sailors to their limits. Alongside the military actions, a rich tapestry of historical mythology grew around the Pacific War, deeply influencing national narratives and collective memories. For the Allied nations, particularly the United States, the conflict became a symbol of resilience and moral triumph, often portrayed through stories of heroism and sacrifice that elevated the war to near-mythic status. Meanwhile, in the Axis countries, especially Japan, the war was mythologized through narratives emphasizing honor, sacrifice, and national duty, shaping public perception and wartime morale. These stories, while sometimes exaggerated, served to reinforce national identities and justify the hardships endured during the conflict. The convergence of advanced military capability, strategic combat employment, and the powerful myths that grew from the war's narratives created a complex legacy. They influenced not only the immediate military outcomes, but also the long-term cultural understanding of the Pacific War, impacting how subsequent generations viewed their history and identity. Understanding this intricate relationship helps to explain how the Pacific War was not only a fierce military confrontation, but also a profound cultural phenomenon that continues to resonate today.